Think macro.
Howdy Crystal Conclave, it's NESHY, and today you're going to be learning just a little bit more about Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building. We're reacting to a video by a channel called Ground Game. Check it out. Now, what is Ground Game? It's, in my opinion, an underrated channel. If you have the chance, please check it out. They create S-tier content to make you better at Yu-Gi-Oh! It's founded by Isaiah Houston, who's a personal friend of mine. I met him at a tournament in Vegas back in 2019 before both of us started making content, and he's been tearing it up ever since with multiple YCS tops. Today we're going to be watching a new episode of their series called Mind Crush, which is created by Kozaki, a member of Ground Game, where we dive heavily into deck building philosophy. So this is going to be really theory heavy. Kozaki actually helped me build my deck for YCS LA, a fantastic resource that knows what he's talking about. They sent me this episode early, actually, Mind Crush Lesson 4, to make a reaction to. So big shout outs to Ground Game for letting me react to this early before this drops. And you guys got to promise to go check them out, all right? Let us begin. Orangutank, thank you for the sub. I appreciate that. Let me know if you...
I heard you like drawing starters. So, for starters, I started letting you draw starters so you can start drawing starters with your starters to start your turn.
That's really big. I appreciate that.
But it would be a shame if you bricked. Welcome to Lesson 4 of the Mind Crush Masterclass,
One brick.
where we capture and unveil all the core Yu-Gi-Oh! Principles that...
Can I just talk about his voice real quick? If anyone else loves that like silky smooth voice, give me a 1. Anyway.
are both
timeless and universal.
past, present, or future. These principles will always be significant and develop your ground game. In this lesson, you will learn about the law of diminishing returns. More specifically, you will learn the 2 fallacies that harbor diminishing returns in your deck.
This is really important. What's cool is that he said that he talks about Rainbow Bridge of Salvation specifically, so that's also why I wanted to react to this, because we play Rainbow Bridge of Salvation. Oh, by the way, shout outs DB Grinder.
If you have not learned Mind Crush Lesson 3 on 40 versus 41, then you are doing yourself a disservice, as we make references to how one card can impact your deck throughout this lesson. You may have a difficult time understanding what we're talking about, so learn Lesson 3 first, pinned in the upper right corner of your screen. Ground gamers, if you listen right to the entire lesson, we've got a bonus just for
I'm a ground gamer.
you.
I'm a ground gamer.
Think macro. In economics, the law of diminishing returns predicts that after a certain level of capacity is reached, adding an additional input will actually result in smaller increases of output. For example, let's suppose you are watering a tree by yourself. You are providing labor, where you are the only input and fruits are the only output. Watering the tree by yourself only produces 2 fruits as output. When you add a second input, let's say another laborer, you both together produce 7 fruits as output. You now believe if you keep increasing your input, you will get even more output. So now you decide to add a third input, let's say a third laborer. The 3 of you together are now only able to grow 6 fruits instead of more than 7.
Comes to a point where it's diminishing returns.
Too much water kills the tree.
Yeah.
This is the law of diminishing returns.
Right, let's go back to that definition. I'll go to this side. A theory in economics that predicts that after some optimal level of capacity is reached, adding an additional factor of production will actually result in a smaller increase in output. It's crazy to think about, right? There's a certain curve, and I'm sure he's going to show it here, where at some point it becomes actually detrimental to add more, and hence the diminishing returns.
Law of diminishing returns. And this law exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building under 2 different fallacies. For the following fallacies, treat the cards in your main deck as inputs, and the impact of each card as outputs. The first fallacy
True,
is the
Heinz.
belief that maxing out ratios is always the correct approach. A common example is deciding to main deck 3 sci-frame gear gamma and 1 sci-frame driver, where the input is equal to gamma and the output is equal to both the desired and undesired impacts that gamma brings to your deck,
I'm tracking.
which is either the ability to draw a brick or the ability to negate the activation and destroy an opponent's monster.
Yeah, that's what we're after.
Every duelist that decides to main deck
Man, the
sci-frame
brick going
gear
right
gamma
through driver's head.
hopes to resolve gamma in an offensive capacity on their turn. That is the best case scenario, because they can then link or synchro summon with driver as material to unbrick the second and third gammas remaining left in their deck. Hope
That'd be awesome.
is not a plan. The best duelists in the world are comfortable with being uncomfortable. They
Prepare
are
for the
prepared
worst, but hope for the
worst-case
best.
scenarios. So let's address the worst case scenario. What if you resolved gamma in a defensive capacity on your opponent's turn? If you did, your 1 sci-frame driver will probably be banished in the end phase, rendering your remaining 2 gammas as bricks that you will eventually draw into in the foreseeable future. But let's dive deeper. One input offers you 2 outputs, one desirable and one undesirable. You love the desired output so much, but you do not see it happen often with one input alone. So you had a bright idea. You increase consistency by trying to optimize your hypergeometric distribution, and you figured 3 gamma and 1 driver is best. While it is true, you will see your desired output much more frequently. Under the law of diminishing returns, your returns diminish significantly after the first gamma resolves. This phenomenon occurs everywhere in Yu-Gi-Oh! Remember, the first fallacy is the belief that maxing out ratios is always the correct
That's
approach.
facts. After the first one.
This is a fallacy.
Here we go. Even with Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, after the first one goes through, it does act as a terraforming. But in the end, you do have that terraforming and you do have that Sapphire Pegasus. But the other 2 goods in that extra Bridge of Salvation just ends up becoming a brick. Kozaki and I were trying to figure this out so much of like, how do we make Foolish Burial Goods not a brick? Like the second 2 copies. And then obviously like a use for Salvation would be great. Something we thought of was using Shuffle Reborn. Because if you open goods in Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, that's just awful, right? But if you goods send Shuffle Reborn, then Shuffle Reborn can put back the Salvation. But that's just not optimal. He just likes hopping on the couch, I guess. Look at him go. Hey, Kuroko. Just loving life. Just taking it all in. Yeah, this all is dependent on if there's a grind game, right? If the game lasts more than like 3 turns, which honestly happens more than people think. People think that Yu-Gi-Oh! Just ends on turn 3 all the time, right? But it actually goes into a grind game more times than people think, especially if you're playing a deck like Crystal Beast. You kind of get into the gutters with it all. Yeah,
Because this is not always the correct approach. There are other approaches that are available on the table, but many
the second 2
refuse to
prosperities are
acknowledge
not
them.
bricks.
The first approach is the worst option, which is to add more targets in your deck to prolong the inevitability of bricking.
That's true. This is a fix that you can do, but what'll end up happening is you'll draw the brick more often than you're increasing the chance of letting that first card resolve, if that makes sense. So by adding a second card, you are increasing the chance of that card resolving, like Brilliant Fusion, Gamma, Goods, but at the same time, you're also increasing your chance of drawing that card more than you're increasing the chance of that card resolving in the first place. I don't think Gamma Driver is a fair argument compared to Brilliant Fusion, Garnet, Goods, and Salvation, because you can draw Driver and still resolve Gamma, but if you draw Garnet or draw Salvation, you can't resolve Brilliant Fusion, and you can't, I mean, you can resolve goods, but you're not going to have a good thing to send. You're not going to have another target. But with Gamma, this is like the difference between, this is literally the difference between a Garnet and a Driver. You know, Driver could also be a Takatomborg, but you can draw Driver and still have Gamma resolve, but if you draw Garnet, Brilliant Fusion won't resolve. So adding a second target would help with that, but you're going to draw it more often.
But usually these targets
He's probably going to
themselves
say that.
are more bricks.
Yeah.
The second approach is to eliminate diminishing returns by reducing inputs to optimize outputs. The law of diminishing returns predicts that after a certain level of capacity is reached, adding an additional input will actually result in less returns. Such is the case for Pot of Prosperity. This is a card that everyone tends to max out at 3 in their main deck. When drawn, most duelists utilize this card to its fullest return by banishing 6 cards from their extra deck.
I don't mind going
If you
another
adopt
6
this plan every time you see Pot of Prosperity, you will have 3 cards remaining in your extra deck. Realistically, most duelists tend to summon at least 1 monster in their extra deck per duel.
That's true.
We know this to be true because if special summoning from the extra deck was not a priority for the duelist, then Pot of Duality would be the superior choice over Pot of Prosperity. If you do summon at least 1 monster with 2 cards remaining in the extra deck, the third Pot of Prosperity would become a brick.
But what are the odds you're going to see that? All right, so let's check out this math. Are you guys ready to put on your glasses, go through some math? Benefit of 2 prosperity instead of 3. 1, you can successfully resolve both pots, each for a maximum value of 6 in any given duel, without tolerating diminishing returns in the foreseeable future. Wasting your draw phase on drawing your brick. That's if you draw through like all your deck, though, is the other thing. 15% less likely to see another Pot of Prosperity among your top 6. This way, one of your extra deck monsters was not banished worthlessly in vain for nothing. But I mean, even then, I feel like you're always going to see bricks amongst your reveals. So like the next Pot of Prosperity, I guess it's like banished in vain. I could see that. But at the same time, so is like any other brick in your deck. So are the Gammas or the Rainbow Bridge of Salvation. 2.4% less likely to see duplicates in any given opening hand. Extra room for better cards in main deck. While all of that is true, I want to see the math on how much prosperity you're losing out on, though. And here are the calculations on the hypergeometric calculator. So let's calculate it ourselves with, let's see if he did it. Yeah, check it out. Out of 40 cards, you have 3 Pot of Prosperity, and your sample size of 5 cards in your opening hand, and you want to see 1. The difference is almost 10%. Is that over 10%? It's over 10% difference between 23.72%, we'll say, and 33.76%. That's a massive difference with seeing Pot of Prosperity in your opening hand if you're playing 3 instead of 2. I would argue, I mean, this isn't that big of a deal. I would say this is a bigger deal, seeing duplicates, but the 10% is greater than this 2%, right? So I would say playing the third, here, I'll go this way. Playing the third outweighs this 2.4%. Because 10% is greater than 2%, obviously. Let's keep going. Thanks, Nate.
The third approach is the best, but also the most difficult.
Okay.
Use critical thinking.
Uh-oh.
Examples of thinking critically are finding alternative use applications for bricks.
This is what Kozaki and I tried to do.
Gemini Amber into Thunder Dragon Colossus. While this does not solve our diminishing returns dilemma, with the second and third copies of Brilliant Fusion, this does render 2 out of 4 of the cards as non-bricks. A second example would be finding a way to obtain value from the cards banished under a third pot of prosperity. The third pot would still be a brick, but cards you decide to banish become integral for your deck's strategy, which is a far greater return than running 2 pot of prosperity. The diminishing return is then justifiable in this niche scenario. A third example of using...
I would say that second utility is nice, but at the same time, I would say the secondary utility that comes with this is overshadowed by seeing the prosperity more often in your opening hand. I would rather see the prosperity in my hand more often rather than play a third just to get value. Like, I wouldn't play a third just to get extra value like this out of, you know, banishing Goliath to attach under Rise Heart or banishing for Grand Magi or like Eater of Millions. I would say that's not worth it for me to play a third just for that. I would play a third to see it more, right?
Scenario. A third example of using critical thinking is main decking 2 Emergency Teleport, knowing in full anticipation that 1 Gamma will be used defensively as a worst case scenario, while E-Telly can unbrick the remaining 2 Gammas out of the deck.
I do like that idea.
Just do not make the mistake of running 3 emergency teleports in this circumstance.
I mean, why not though? Does he... This is the thing that Kozaki and I kind of discussed on. I think he wants to play a deck with no bricks at the end of the day. But, you know, games don't last long enough so that you're drawing through your entire deck. And so I see people play 3 E-Telly because, here, we'll go back to the E-Telly slide. You play 3 E-Telly because you want to see it more than you're doing the... Because if you're playing the 3 Gamma, and you use one of them to go ahead and do its thing with the Gamma, and use it as a Solemn Strike, basically. But then the other 2, you're just as likely to see to draw into the Gamma brick as you are into the E-Telly. So I would say play the 3rd E-Telly because you'd rather see that than the Gamma brick, because you have even odds of drawing the brick or the E-Telly, whereas if you play a 3rd E-Telly, you have more of a chance of drawing that rather than the Gamma brick. Now you are making the 3rd E-Telly a brick now, but the game's not going to last that long, right? I don't know. Some of this theory is flawed in my opinion. I would love to discuss it.
Case scenario, while E-Telly can unbrick the remaining 2 Gammas out of the deck. Just do not make the mistake of running 3.
Yeah, after Gamma's in your hand, E-Telly is a brick. But at the same time, E-Telly can summon from hand as well. I'm pretty sure.
Teleports in this circumstance. The second fallacy is the belief that you must have the same line of play every single end board turn 1. Nonsense. This is a fallacy in Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building, because if you designed your deck to successfully execute your end board every turn 1, it will render the rest of your deck rudderless without an alternative strategy to win.
So by playing these instead of like adding terraformings or metaverse to get to Lair of Darkness, you get like multiple different lines of play that don't do the same thing. So you don't get diminishing returns.
You should strive to build your deck as consistently as possible for the purpose of card accessibility, but it should not
precision
be consistent
versus accuracy.
in strategy. Understand and know the difference. Consistency in strategy is an inconsistency in adaptation.
Let's try and understand this. I want to peek into his mind right here. Consistency in strategy is an inconsistency in adaptation. So if you're doing the same thing every time, then you're not adapting, is basically what he's saying. Let's take it back a little bit.
Strategy, accessibility, but it should not be consistent for the purpose. You should strive to build your deck as consistently as possible for the purpose of card accessibility, but it should not be consistent in strategy.
But it should not be consistent in strategy. So you should be able to turn on a dime. That makes sense. It always helps to have a goal end board though, right? Obviously, you want to be flexible, but you want to have like a goal in mind of what you want your end board to be.
Understand and know the difference. Consistency in strategy is an inconsistency in adaptation.
Like if I see so many combo players who, especially who are new to the game, just stick to the game plan. You know, shout outs Triff. Stick to the game plan, but they stick to it so, by script that they're not actually adapting to different end boards and they're just kind of tunnel visioned on what they're doing. In Yu-Gi-Oh, you want to be able to adapt and find multiple ways to pull off what you want to do.
As the saying goes, if you want a better life, you need to make better choices. And you cannot fathom all the choices available to you unless you are first willing to let go of limiting beliefs. This is a limiting belief. There is no one strategy that is potent for every single matchup.
Yeah, that's true. That's why we cite in Secret Village of the Spellcasters for certain matchups, right? Yeah, you want to be able to tailor your end board to what would be best for that matchup in particular.
As a toolbox,
Rox Enjoyer, welcome to
accessing any card you want, but make sure all cards do not depend on one another, let alone one common strategy. The following deck is an example of this fallacy. This Tri-Brigade Sprite deck has 8 bricks, 0 other, 14 disruptions, 6 extenders, and 13 starters, among 10 of which can also become extenders.
Okay, I see you. Yeah, these would all be considered bricks, depending on if you have Karis or not. It's a good amount of disruptions. I don't know if Revolt is a disruption. I would call that more of a bomb. Going back to like Patrick Hoban terms, I think Revolt is the bomb, but you can count it as a disruption. And 6 extenders. Maybe Red and Carrot are disruptions, but they also act as extenders. I would say, however, that they do act more as disruptions than extenders, though. And then starters, yep, those are all starters. Those do all be starters. 13 starters, that's a good amount.
Alongside 4 additional starters in their extra deck. According to this design, the ideal hand is 2 starters, 2 disruptions, and either 1 brick or 1 extender.
Yeah, you gotta have some other cards, such as Prosperity or Triple Tactics Talent. Because the ideal Sprite hand is starter, extender, starter, extender, disruption, other. I'm pretty sure.
Extender. This deck is designed to be a toolbox, built to be highly consistent in card accessibility. The Tri-Brigade engine can access the Sprite engine, and the Sprite engine can access the Tri-Brigade engine.
That's fact.
All thanks to Gigantic Sprite and Sprite Spring.
The 2 glue.
There is only one evident strategy: to end on Pit Knight early, double Dragon Lords, and IP Masquerena with Tri-Brigade Revolt and Sprite Smashers set, or a variation of this. This is an exceptional end board turn 1, and it can be achieved consistently due to Gigantic Sprite and Sprite Spring. However, let's presume this duel will proceed after this end board is successfully established.
Which is possible.
Let's presume this end board has been overcome successfully.
Ooh.
The rest of the main deck, in its entirety,
you can still use Revolt to make Shurag and then search for follow-up, but yeah.
To experience diminishing returns in that every card drawn moving forward is a card with a function dedicated to establishing the board that was once established.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're not trying to go into a... I don't know. You're not trying to go into a grind game. If your opponent opens Sphere Mode Lightning Storm and your board's gone, and then they have followed with like Branded Fusion, you're not going to win that game anyway. It's weird because Yu-Gi-Oh's in a spot where you're allowed to play a lot of bricks in your deck because the game's not going to last that long. Like 5 turns, I'll say, is probably the average Yu-Gi-Oh game. Let's hear
This
what...
deck's one strategy is akin to a very sharp blade. It is a formidable weapon, but with a blatant weakness: graveyard dependency. 10 out of 41 cards in the main deck, alongside 2 out of the 4 starters in the extra deck, depend on accessing the graveyard. This exposure across the board prevents accessibility to 2 of the 5 cards, the Double Dragon Lords and Revolt namely, and a less optimal Sprite Smasher set.
Okay, so he's hinting at you want to have other cards to play against these counters.
So here's the question. Does this deck's graveyard dependency, exposure to diminishing returns under Fallacy 1, and exposure to diminishing returns under Fallacy number 2 imply that this is a bad deck? The answer is absolutely not. In fact, the exact deck list came in the top 8 in the 2023 Yu-Gi-Oh! 250th YCS in Los Angeles.
There we go. It's a good deck.
Highlighted by Hisam Jahari. But what this exposure does imply is that there is room for further improvement mathematically. It is optimized under hypergeometric distribution, but it is not optimized for reduced diminishing returns.
Then I guess show me a deck where it has 0 diminishing returns, because I don't think that's possible in like a top 8 list. Because you want to play the 3E telly because you'd like to see that more often than you're seeing the brick gamma. Because if you're playing 2 and 2, you're going to see them equally as often. Just not completely sold on this argument.
You can always max out your deck in ratios of 3 to achieve an optimal hypergeometric distribution. Your deck will suffer under the law of diminishing returns after your plays have been exhausted. 2 opposite sides of the same coin, 2 opposing properties within similar parabolic functions. Will you prioritize low variance, or will you prioritize a high output elasticity? The choice is yours. Thank you for listening. If you have received value from today's lesson, punch the like button.
Whoa.
Subscribe.
Epic. All right, let's look at this one more time. Trying to get into his head. High output elasticity equals low marginal rate of diminishing returns. Low variance equals consistent hypergeometric distribution. I mean, we want consistency over the ability to grind in a grind game, though, right? What if we get Danielle in on this? Because Danielle's good at economics. Danielle's an internal auditor, and she graduated with economics, so she's going to love this. Yeah, he definitely proposes an issue, but we're not sure if this is a proper solution. So we're talking about diminishing returns, right? Your favorite. I'll kind of catch you up to speed a little bit on this. Yeah, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! But basically, there's these cards called Gamma and Driver. All right, so you play these 3 in your deck, and this one's a brick. In order for one of these to resolve, you need to have this in your deck. So, but after you use the first one, the other 2 become bricks, right? Does that make sense?
I thought that was the actual art.
Oh, no.
That's really unfortunate.
Here. All right, so you have these 3, right?
Oh.
And you have Driver. So you play this at 3 because you want to see this in your opening hand. But this is a brick. You don't want to draw this. But after you use the first ones, because this summons out this.
Yeah.
And after you use these, then these two become useless in your deck.
So like really quickly, it just is not good.
Yeah.
Is it the only good time is the first time you open? Like, is there any other good times to see it?
Well, this is what the proposed solution is.
Okay. Did you already watch through all of this?
Yeah.
Oh no, he got to my stuff.
Little Stitch.
I know, Bean already lost an ear. Hey, no, get back here.
All right, so check this out.
No, I can't think. I'm stressed.
Kuroko,
All right.
come here. Come here.
Oh, he thinks it's a game.
I'll take this.
He's just gonna get the other one. Now he wants to play.
Hey, stop.
I mean, that plushie has
All right, so
fought against a German Shepherd, so, you know.
So, the point of the emergency teleports is to make sure that
I
these
can't.
are bricked.
Stop. Okay.
So you want to draw this, and then it gets that out of the deck.
Do
so
you
it's not
still
bricked.
need that frame driver
Yeah.
one? Oh, I guess they're all
Basically,
framed. What
this
is
is a
that?
scenario where both of these are out of your deck now. They're banished. They're
Oh.
gone.
But then what's the deal with this teleport?
So this is a card that allows you to special summon this from the deck, so that you don't draw it later and it becomes a brick, right?
Okay.
So what's happening here?
So
is-
it's less of an opening, and now you can play it whenever. Or what
Like-
is?
you don't want to draw it, so this gets rid of it, so that you
Okay.
don't have to draw it anymore. You know what I mean? So you'd much rather see this over seeing that.
Okay. But isn't the probability of seeing it the same?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what we're getting at. Wouldn't you rather play a third emergency teleport? Because if you're playing 2 and 2, you're seeing them both equally.
Yeah, theoretically.
Yeah.
I guess you'd see. So you would see the emergency one more than that original frame driver one. So
Why?
right, because there's only one.
Oh, yeah.
So that one, it's already like that's only like
Yeah,
plus.
that makes sense.
That makes sense. But then the
Like, you
whole.
would see the emergency teleports before the driver.
So I guess in a way, like if you're just comparing it to the driver part, you are seeing it more. So it is better probability wise. It's like increasing at like a decreasing rate kind of situation. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like the payoff is not.
Oh, yeah, it's Beans here.
I know. Well, no, that was from another dog.
Okay, yeah, so this one's fine, but this one's gone from another dog.
Every dog loves this toy. Oh, it's a toy to them. Anyways, it is better than the original like situation.
Yeah, you're kind of
Like it's better. It's just not optimal.
But yeah, it could be optimal if you.
Oh,
what would
you're
the
saying-
optimal solution be?
I know you're kind of leading me with this. I know you're gonna want me to say add a third one
Add
of
a
the
third one.
emergency.
Yeah,
And then that's where it gets diminishing. It's almost like two and a half is like the optimal, but that doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
yeah.
So
But at the same time, would you rather have the same chance at drawing this preferred card over this brick? Like, would you rather have the same chance of seeing them equally, or would you rather have an increased chance of seeing emergency teleport while adding
and then a future brick
a
later.
future brick?
But you at
but-
least get to play the play.
Yeah, and at the same time, the other question to consider is the game even going to last that long for that to even matter?
Oh, actually, now we're getting into like the game theory side of it,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. Yeah, because if the game ends before that, then who cares? Then it's almost as if like suboptimal becomes optimal.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
because it's like you have your overall game, but then you have these little I forgot what they're called in game theory, but it's basically like a sub game. It's like a mini game within a game, but it's not really a game. It's like the decision making. I don't know what it's called. I forgot. But yeah, I guess that draws like an interesting point with that. I think that's a big factor of where the game ends. So yeah, I would say if the game ends before you see that theoretical... No, he's gonna get the other one. He's gonna get my shit. He's sneezing a lot. He's doing that dog thing where he just sneezes on everything. He's really playing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, I think that it comes down to that then. Where at what point the game is ending.
Yeah.
Oh. You might be onto something. Yeah.
How deep in your deck are you going to dig?
Yeah. That's actually a really big factor. Well, I went to a big, but it is an important one. Huh. All right.
So he brings up a problem, but we're discussing if the solution is viable.
I think it's good. I don't think it's the best.
Yeah, I think he has a good proposed solution, but I think the best.
I think he's off to the right, on the right track.
Yeah.
I think you might be onto something with the third. The only way to like know though is like to just test it though and see.
Well, and the crazy thing is it has been tested.
Oh.
Check it out.
Did you watch the
So
whole
he
video
plays-
already?
Yeah. We
Oh,
watched it.
okay. I was like spoilers.
Three emergency teleport,
Okay.
and then 3 Cyframe Gamma. He talks about the issues with this deck, right?
Okay.
After it makes its first turn 1 board,
Sure.
then it doesn't have any follow-up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he talks about...
According to this design, the ideal hand
this deck
is
bad?
2 starters, 2 disruptions, and either under fallacy number 2, imply that this is a bad deck? The answer is absolutely not. In fact, the exact deck list came in the top 8 in the 2023 Yu-Gi-Oh! 250th YCS in Los Angeles.
Hey, we were there.
Yeah, we were there. But, yeah, so that guy was there with us.
Wow.
So he proved that, playing the 30 telly is better than playing 2. I don't know how much that really came up like specifically.
All right. So, where does this go?
What I'm trying to figure out is then like, all right, show me a deck where it uses the optimal ratios, because he's saying that, this does work, but it could be optimized. Then I'm like, show me an optimized deck list then that tops. Where are the results?
So this one's already been proven that you could get at least as far to 8th place in a
8th
competitive.
place at the 250th right?
That's a lot of people. No,
This is big. Top 8. I don't think people understand.
I saw the sea of people.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Like, this is... I think this is like... This could be considered a peak deck, in my opinion, if you reach top 8 at a YCS, especially as big as the 250.
That's actually really impressive.
I think this is like... I would call this optimal.
Well, yeah, and I guess what is he defining as optimal? Because if you're looking for a perfect like situation every time, that doesn't exist. I think that's pretty optimal. 3, I mean, it sounds pretty good. It sounds like it works. I think what you brought up is like a key thing though. If the game ends before the diminishing returns, then I would consider that optimal. All right, we lost him.
No, yeah. Yeah, depends on how long.
Because what you want to do is first you want to win.
Yeah.
Period. So, but as long as like you're ending on the peak before it starts to diminish, that is optimal. Maybe.
Yeah, if you end the game at the right time.
Yeah, at the peak before the diminishing returns.
Yeah. So
that is mathematical. I would consider that optimal.
The timing of the game is a big factor in this, in that if you decide where the game ends.
Yeah.
I think there are certain choices
Time
that
factor.
you can make during Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you say, like, I could push for game here, or I could set up for another control turn. I'm sure, like, everyone's thought of this. I could set up for another control turn, or I could end the game right here, but I could risk my opponent, like, having an interruption so that I don't get to that point. Basically, the choice you have to make in your head is, can I afford to play another, like, back and forth of Yu-Gi-Oh? Can I afford to play through 2 more turns? Does my deck have enough gas where it can support that? Or do I just have everything out on the field, and do I need to just make a risk and push for the game now because I won't be able to do that in the future? You know, like, basically take your shot when you can. I think the timing of the game is really important when discussing this.
Yeah, and like the interesting, because I'm thinking 2 different ways with that too. There's like the statistical side, like your overall probability of winning, and then how you get that is like all these different factors. And like we don't know this equation, but it's just like this is just a portion of that equation. It's like the this like deck building part. It's just a portion. You do have that time factor, and then you have your opponent, and then all the decision making. It's like a tree, like, you know, you pick this side or this side, and then from there your optimal will change based off that decision and that decision up until a point where one person has the upper hand and they win.
Yes, obviously this discussion can take many twists and turns and take on many forms. So let's go ahead and continue the discussion in the comments section. Go ahead and talk about what you agree with or disagree with about the video, what you learned, more importantly. If you learned something, let me know. And please check out Ground Game. They're, you know, make high quality content, as you saw from this one right here. Definitely go through the Mind Crush series, and I'm gonna bounce. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace.
Bye.